in 1 minute. So we'll be seeing her come up. So, you know, if Randy can't join the show, that wouldn't be too good, but still, we will have her on coming up real soon. So in theory, Alejandro, she'll be contacting me like in a minute. So I don't know if you get to see it on the screen or not, but I'll let you know. Yeah.
Great. Just let me know. So you want me to keep going or something?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Cool. Yeah.
So a couple of other people we're going to have Cheryl Costa. She writes for Syracuse New Times. She's a columnist, a weekly columnist there. But what thing she did, and do you have her on lately?
Yes, I have. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So your listeners will know she wrote this book called something about UFOs. I can't remember the name of the book right now. Do you remember the name of the book? It's like UFO National Statistics and Trends, I think it's called.
Okay. Hey, we got our guest. All right.
I'll wrap it up then.
Yeah. So anyways, sorry, I don't have the book right here in front of me, but
no problem. It's just what's great about what she did is she wrote about all of these areas, UFO sightings throughout the country, and she also pushed it. Like she went out to the media to let people know. So her book got tons and tons of publicity all over the country, which is really exciting. But you can read more about them at ufocongress.com.
Great. Thanks so much, Alejandro. And thanks for filling in.
No problem. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
You too.
All right. Salma, how are you? Can you hear me, Salma? Salma, can you hear me? Hello? Hello? So much for the sound check that worked before. Oh, she's gone. Okay. Hopefully she will call back in. And, you know, I had a thought when I was doing this Google Hangout. The reason I did it is because I know Randy's well versed in it. For some reason, it's not working for him, but also, I just thought it would work for people that wanted to join in as we go along here, and hopefully we'll hear back from Salma. She should be back any minute. Now my camera's down. Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. No? There it is. Okay. So while we're waiting, I might as well talk to you since you're right here.
Are you kidding me? Okay, yeah. What do you want to talk about?
So what do you think as you've listened to the show for how long now, would you say?
I would say at least 3 or 4 years.
Oh, that long? Yeah. And what do you think is like the most interesting case that I've talked about?
Oh,
or some of them anyway.
I think the Canadian case where the UFO went underwater.
Oh, that's where I went, up in Shag Harbor.
Shag Harbor. That's a very interesting case for me. The one tonight's interesting because there were so many. And of course, you haven't done a show on it. Where you hope you're about to, but there were so many witnesses at that one time that makes it very interesting. But I like the shows that talk about specific cases a lot more than other kind of shows that.
Yeah.
About talking about UFO and UFO subject in general.
All right, I think we have you. We have you.
Sorry,
how are you?
I couldn't connect earlier. I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Great, thanks so much. We thought this was going to be for a minute there. We thought this was going to be a disaster because, unfortunately, Randy is not able. He's not been able to connect with us.
Oh.
And
oh no.
He did. Yeah, he did fine on the test, and I could get him through a phone line, but the phone is not going through my computer and into, so no one can hear him basically. But welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for. It's a real honor actually to have you on. You know, this case I consider one of the very best cases out there with all the witnesses, and so I have a number of questions for you, but. In your own words, I'd love to hear directly from a witness like you. Are you having trouble with your phone?
I am. I'm
You-
sorry. I'm going to try and hold it as steady as I can. It was great earlier, but now I'm kind of moving it. So I apologize.
Okay, no problem. So can you tell, you probably everyone had different vantage points when things were happening in the beginning. I heard somewhere there was flashes of light first. Did you see that?
Yes. My first sort of experience in the experience itself was seeing flashing lights in the distance. I don't know if you are very familiar, but the school that I attended is very rural. So it used to be a farm, so there's a lot of open space. And so our playground was essentially just not dirt, but kind of dirt. I don't know if that's how it is now, but that it was a very, very big space of land. And then the boundary of that playground were essentially the trunks of trees. And beyond that was bush, very tall grass, savanna region, lots of trees, lots of koppies. It wasn't mountainous per se, but they were, little koppies, sort of smaller hills. And that's where the flashes that I saw were.
Now, did everyone around you say, "Hey, what's that? What's going on?" And did you all start talking to each other, like, what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, initially, what it was it's kind of, you start to question yourself. It's like, okay, did I see that? And then there were a few of the people who were pointing in the same direction where the flashing lights or the flashes were coming from. And so we all sort of gathered and looked at each other and said, did you see that? And kind of corroborated each other's stories. Like, yeah, I saw that. What does it look like? It looks like flashing lights. But it started off very slowly in that most of us, weren't sure exactly what we had seen. And so we kind of just like, okay, did I see that? Didn't I see that? But then when a few of us kind of clustered together, we realized that we were all seeing the same thing.
Now, there was one little girl that was interviewed by Dr. Mack that said she heard a sound, and when he asked her what the sound was, she said it was like someone was blowing into a flute. Did you happen to hear any sound?
I did not hear any sound. I would say the most, I mean, other than the entire thing being almost like an out-of-body experience,
Yeah.
time seemed to be the really kind of odd thing that stuck out, in that it seemed like it had slowed down immensely. I had
Really?
no concept of time. Yeah. I had no concept of time from the time that I had seen the flashing lights to the time that I saw the being to when I let go of my friend Emma's hand. I do not know how much time went by. It seemed like everything was moving really slowly.
Isn't that interesting? That's what a lot of people say during a car accident. Everything moves really slowly. It seems to. Now, when there was only, I know there was only one adult. There was a parent that was in a tuck shop, I guess it was called.
Yes.
but no, and I don't even know what that is. But
a tuck shop is like it's what we have on our school premises, where you sell candy and fruit and soda. So we don't have cafeterias. We have, unless you go to boarding school, which I did in high school, so you'd have a cafeteria. But the tuck shop is really where you can buy all your treats. So lots of chocolates and all of that. That's where the only adult was on the playground. Yes.
Yeah, and was that unusual? I always wonder why there weren't teachers out among the children. Usually, in most schools, when they go out to recess or something like that, the children go out with a teacher or two. So was it unusual that there wasn't a teacher?
Incredibly, and it was only because the teachers were having a staff meeting that particular day.
What timing?
So,
yeah.
So they were all in their staff meeting, and break was a little bit longer than usual, which we loved. And it was a Friday, so that was even better. And us as grade sixes were we were the oldest ones on the playground because the grade 7s were taking an exam, because we have grade 7 exams, end of year exams. And so we were kind of manning the playground, and I remember certainly feeling like, yeah, we're the oldest ones on the playground, as you do,
Yeah.
at recess. But yes, there was one teacher in the tuck shop. I actually completely forgot about that. The tuck shop was located in an area where the younger children played. So the playground was essentially one big play area, if you can think of it. But the younger kids from grade 1 to about grade 4 had their own section. It wasn't separated, but they just had their own section that had swings and, was kind of just their area that they played in.
Wow. Okay, so let's continue on to, you saw the flashes, and it was over to this area where you were not allowed to go in. I know there were like a lot of trees. It was hard to get through. And so was there actually a fence there in front of this area you weren't supposed to go?
No, there was no fence. What it was literal tree trunks as the boundary of the playground. So if you can think of big eucalyptus trees, the trunks of those trees were what separated our playground from, where we were not supposed to go beyond. But there was no fence. The rest of that was just open area, open bush. You could see as far as the eye would allow you beyond that. So there was no obstruction really, other than those tree trunks.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. And so let's hear the rest. Now I know one of the children described that the craft went what appeared to go along like a power line. Or did you see anything like that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Martin?
Yeah, one of the witnesses said that it appeared to go like along, I don't want to say a power line or some type of
Oh, I see. Yeah, I didn't see that, but there was a weird like buzz or hum that again I couldn't make too much sense of, because I just didn't know. Sometimes electric lines buzz, but it was a very, very loud buzz. And then also, given this whole time thing, I just wasn't sure if I was imagining it or what was going on. Like, I didn't really know what to make of it, but I did not see anything particularly near the power line. I do know that I definitely felt the buzz, a lot of buzz.
Yeah. Now, were you and your fellow schoolmates, were you drawn toward this area? I mean, did you all start like flowing down toward it to see what was going on?
We did. We did eventually, and it was right by the logs, as we would call them. And we could sit on these logs sometimes and eat our lunch, which is what we would do. But we stood there and kind of just congregated, a few of us, and looked in the area where both the flashing lights were and wherever this buzzing sound was coming from the electric poles. And, if I saw what I called the being, or a being, that was maybe about 3 to 4 feet away from me, but it didn't cross over the boundary of the tree trunks. Never.
Really? And now what about the floating? Did it appear to be floating?
It did not appear to be floating for me. I saw it as being grounded on this like copy-like area. Like I keep saying, I was able to draw a craft to the best of my memory, but I did not see it floating.
Mm-hmm. What about on top of the craft? And did you think there were actually 2 beings, or was it one that showed up twice?
So, that I don't know. I think that's a question that I may never know, but it's definitely a question I've asked myself since the experience, because I honestly couldn't tell you. If they were 2, they were identical. There was no difference between the 2. If they were in fact 2, I have no idea.
Now, what about, I saw some of the pictures that were drawn, and some of them it showed with, or one at least showed with long hair, and others showed no hair at all. What do you remember seeing?
I remember seeing one that did not have hair. mine did not have no facial hair, no, I mean, I couldn't tell if there was body hair because it was in the closest thing I can describe it as is being in like a scuba diving suit, which I think is what I described it as when I was 11, because that was what I knew. That was like the closest thing I could relate it to. But I don't recall it did not have any hair, no facial hair, no hair in its head, nothing. Skin was almost like porcelain, really.
Really? And was it like almost like a white color?
Yes. Well,
Like a porcelain white?
yeah, yes, almost like a nude kind of porcelain kind of color is what I could best describe it. I think I said porcelain in that it just looked completely perfect. There was no blemish, there was nothing. It just was so smooth, and it almost looked I think porcelain is just it's very firm, it's stiff, it's kind of stoic. Like, so if you were to think of a statue, I would be like, okay, it's kind of like a porcelain statue, except that this being was moving, but there was no, the expression on its face was not one that I really understood. There was no smile, there was no frown, they were not there was no facial recognition for me to comprehend at that time.
Did it change at all, or did it stay exactly the same?
In terms of looks or location?
No, as far as any expressions. Like you said, the expressions were nothing you recognized. I'm just wondering if did it show any expressions at all? And looks like your screen froze. I don't know if you can hear me, but looks like it froze on your end. You may want to sign out and come back to us. And it might start working again on its own. Okay, she'll be back. I'm sure she'll be signing back in. I think it's really, really interesting so far. And I will, if the time comes in the next hour and people in the chat and listening live would like to join us on Google Hangouts and ask her a question, that is, here she's coming back.
Hi, sorry, I don't know. I've got full signal on my end. Can you guys hear me okay?
Oh yeah, you're fine. Yeah, it's good to have you back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so basically what I was asking is if it changed any expression at all, or did it stay exactly the same like a statue?
For me, what I remember is that it stayed exactly the same. It moved from place to place in terms of its location, but its physical appearance did not change.
Yeah. We have Randy on finally. I don't know what happened, but I think I see him. And
Hey,
I'm going to join him in. Hey, Randy,
Hi,
how are
Randall.
you?
Hi, Salma. Hi, Martin. How are you? I'm back.
Great. I'm glad you made it. So yeah, we've having a couple of troubles. I don't know if I'm going to be doing Google Hangout anymore. So Salma has been right into the story. Do you mind if I continue with her, and then Randy will talk about the film after?
Sure.
Okay. So back to you, Salma. So
Okay.
can you repeat how close you were, how close this thing got to you, or you got to it?
Sure. I think it was between like 3 to 5 feet.
Now, how did you feel? I mean, were you scared?
I was confused. I was very intrigued. I wasn't sure, but I don't remember feeling fear. No.
Really?
Not fear that I wasn't. No, I just think I didn't know what I was looking at.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand what I was looking at. So if I felt confused or fearful to that degree, yes, but not to the degree that I thought that this thing was going to harm me.
And when it moved, did it move unlike a human?
Well, when it moved, what I remember is that I would see it over here, and then I would blink, maybe. I mean, again, I don't know about, it seemed like I would blink and it would be over on another side. So I can't really say if it moved like a human, because that's very unhuman-like, like no human can move that way. So the answer to that would be no. But I do remember seeing the being in more than one place in a given period of time, but I don't know what that time frame was. Like I said, I have no idea.
Selma, we have an in-house, in-studio guest named Alan, and he has a question for you. Go ahead.
Hey, Selma. I love
Hi,
your
how are you?
I love your accent and your personality.
Thank you.
Did any of the children consider it a religious experience, or was it just automatically UFO? I don't know what religion the people at the school were, but did that ever come up at all?
Definitely not. The school was predominantly, I think most of the people at the school were Christian, and I am Muslim. So there's no conversation about that in the religion, certainly that I was brought up with, nor the people that I know at school. But there was also no outside influences to what a UFO was per se. I don't know if we knew at that time what we had seen. I don't think we understood fully at 11 what it was we were looking at. We just knew that a few of us had seen something that was very, very unusual, in that we hadn't seen it before, in that not everybody saw it, in that we all had different experiences from it. We felt different things from it. We saw different things. People got different messages. That much we knew was unique and unusual to us. But I don't know if I certainly didn't. I can only speak for myself. I don't believe that any of us classified it as a UFO. We just said it was, something that we'd never seen before.
And one more question: when it was over, is that all you could talk about? I mean, was it just the buzz? That's you couldn't go back to class. I mean, was it?
Yes,
was it that,
it took. It took a long time. Yes, it was for a little bit of time, but we also come from a very strict educational system where you don't have time to be messing around. So after all the interviews, and I honestly don't know, Randall would know more about how many we had because there were so many. It was fun at first to be called out of class to, go talk about what I had seen. And even though I didn't fully comprehend what it was, but to have somebody be like, oh, okay, I thought, well, it's good. Okay, at least this person believes me, or at least they're asking me what I saw. So that's good. Because, it was very hard to convince adults about what it is we had seen. But then it got a bit tiresome. It got kind of tiring at the end. And I was happy to not talk about it for a while. And I didn't until Randall popped into my life in 2010.
Wow. Now, what about your mother? Did she believe you right off the bat?
Yes, she did. My mom did.
Oh,
I was surprised, but happy. Like I was happy that she was open-minded enough to believe in me. Like she believed in me. And that was what was the most important. And because I took a while to tell my parents, but then I thought, well.
Uh-oh. There it goes again. Okay, Randy, there she's back. Are you back?
I'm back.
You're back. Okay, yeah. So it just froze a little bit there. Well, that's great. Now, going back to the encounter itself, do you think you actually made eye contact with this being, whatever it was?
Yes, I did. I know I did. The drawing that I was able to sketch was the exact thing that I saw, and it was this like we locked eyes. I again don't know for how long, but I definitely looked at this being dead in the eye.
Wow. And what did you feel when you did that? I mean, you said you weren't afraid, but was it still just a curiosity at that time? Or did you feel, I know some people feel as though they got a message of some type. Did you have any?
I did not have a message. If I do, I don't know what that message is. It hasn't fully computed maybe. But it was very it was not calming. I don't quite know how to describe it, but it was like nothing I've ever felt before. There was no fear. It was just almost as though this being was looking into my soul, like it knew me, like it knew who I was. That is the best that I can describe this sort of like interlocking of eyes for however long it was. But I was with my friend Emma at the time, and the moment I walked away from her, because I had a younger brother and sister also on the playground, because I was worried about them, the moment I walked away from her, I didn't see the being again. And, you know, I stopped, dropped the gaze and walked away and checked on my siblings. And that was my experience. That was sort of the extent of my experience.
Now, when you made eye contact, did you feel there was an intelligence?
I don't know if I knew, I would even have known what that was at that time. To be honest, I don't know. I felt like this thing knew me, knew some things about me, knew some things about a lot of things, if that makes sense. And I think I told that to my mom one time when she asked me, like, what do you think the point of this was? And I said, I don't know. I think I'm supposed to know something. I think that these things came because they know a lot of things about the earth and they're trying to tell us some things. They know some things, but I don't know what those things are. And at 11, you know, I remember her looking at me like, okay, it's quite existential. But I mean, I didn't know what that was. I had no idea. And I think that that's something I'm still discovering. I don't believe I have any one answer. It's something that unravels with each day, with each year. The more that I talk about it, the more clarity I get. So I have Randall to thank for that, because I didn't for a very, very long time.
Yes. Yeah, I totally get that. I've talked to people like Travis Walton. I'm sure you've heard his name before.
Yes,
and there was a long time.
Met him, yeah.
Oh, there was a long time. He just didn't even want to deal with it or talk about it or think about it. You know, one of the girls that Dr. Mack interviewed, every time I see that clip, I get goosebumps. And that is, she says, he asked, what do you think they wanted? Or I'm not sure exactly what his question was, but she looks back at him and like they were interested. She says it like they were interested. And for some reason, that just gives me goosebumps. Like, again, it's almost like she's describing them looking into her.
Yes, absolutely. It was very unique. You know, you mentioned you posed the analogy of like when you have a car accident, time slows down. Well, I didn't have a car accident, but I was hit by a truck a number of years, like 4 years prior to this experience, and that's how it felt for me. So that's kind of just crazy that you mentioned that. And that's not really something a lot of people know about me. I don't know if the two are interrelated. I have no idea. They maybe are not, but I've always felt that it's something that I can add to the experience of who I am. And there's a reason why I experienced both those things.
Yeah.
Whether they're related or not.
I do want to talk to you how your life has been going and all that, but a couple of things first. And that is, how do you feel when people are trying to like debunk the whole thing? Or first of all, I want to ask you, in the beginning, right after this happened, did anyone try to talk you out of what you saw?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, almost everybody.
Really?
My parents didn't. My parents didn't. And of course, people who interviewed us, there were very few people that I actually felt comfortable enough with there were few people that I felt actually were genuinely interested in what we had experienced, rather than just having a news story, if that makes sense. And even at 11, you can tell like people who are just like there to just talk to you and, okay, what did you see? Sort of going through the general questions. What did you see? What did you hear? You know, there were some people who were a lot more in depth, like Dr. Mack, and a few other people. I think there was an interview, a journalist from BBC who was different too, just in the approach. And so I didn't always feel that people really, even journalists and professionals or quote experts at the time, really believed in what we had seen.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a lot of people who tried to debunk that, a lot. So that had a lot to do with why I just didn't talk about it.
Does it upset you now? Because I know I've done a little research ahead of this show, and there are people out there, of course, calling it a hoax. And
Yes.
and I laugh at that because, I can't imagine school children putting together such an elaborate hoax. It's ridiculous.
And school children, Martin, in a Southern African country with no internet, very few people having cable, have no outside, or very little, not no, but very limited access to outside influence about what UFOs are or could be or whatever. Like, yeah, we had nothing else to do but come up with this hoax. These, 11-year-old children in Zimbabwe coming up with this. I'm like, no, it doesn't upset me. It used to. But I think that as I've gotten older, I have realized that there's obviously a reason why Randall found me so many years later. He literally did track me down in Chicago. Took some time for me to actually believe him and respond to him, because I thought it was a joke. But connecting with him means that I've been able to reconnect with my experience. And so with that comes a whole bunch of other things, of understanding of what that experience could mean. And I don't pretend to have an answer now, nor will I tomorrow, but I think over the course of my life, I absolutely will. It also has encouraged me to speak out about what I have seen, because I believe in what I saw. And I thought, well, suppressing it indicates that I don't believe in what I saw, regardless of what everybody else thinks or may think.
Wow, that's really interesting.
And I got to say something, if I can jump in real quick.
Yeah, go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, I mean, this is not just a few people, and there were many witnesses outside the school that were adults that had their own experience with either this mostly with this craft, but there was a person the day after Ariel. I mean, there's a lot more than. There's a lot of other facts that have come forward over the long time that I've been making this film that give a lot of validity to all the children's testimony.
Randy, wasn't there a lot of sightings in the area after that? I don't know about before that, but after that.
There were on the day before, the night before, the morning of the Ariel event on a farm near the Ariel school, and the day after. On that Saturday, it was in the evening. So there's just a lot. There was a pilot that was flying at 3 pilots actually that were flying at 25,000 feet the night before. They actually had all seen this thing fly by, and they couldn't explain it. It disturbed them enough to get back to Johannesburg Airport, where they were flying from Botswana. So they're passing the Zimbabwean border. When they saw this, and enough to ask the radar controller, did you see anything on radar? Because this thing had apparently appeared on their left-hand wing, flew across they're right directly in front of them, and crossed the entire horizon in 4 seconds, which is unheard of. And these guys see meteorites and satellite reentries and that all the time, and they actually had it on radar for a few seconds in Johannesburg Airport. Anyway, this is just one of many other things that give validity to Salma and many others that were there that day.
Thank you, Randy. I'm going to be talking to you in a little bit
about
how you put this film together and all that. But thanks and anytime you want to jump in, that's great. Anytime you want to jump into the comment.
I was wondering if the pilots described the.
Go ahead.
If the pilots described the object the same as the children did.
They described it as a ball of light. That's all he could say. It was a ball of light. They all thought it was another plane. There were 2 planes in the air at the time, and they thought it was the plane that was coming to formate. These were 2 commercial airlines, and they were, in Africa you can actually fly in formation and you can get away with it. But they had mistaken.
You can.
A lot of things happen in Africa. So he had thought it was on his right-hand side. The pilot said, "No, I'm on your left-hand side." And he said, "Well, what's that on my right-hand side?" And they both, all 3 of them, the 2 pilots in one plane and the one in the other, all saw this ball, and that's how they described it. It was a ball of light. and they were looking at it for a while, and then it crossed there right in front of them, and the speed just was incredible. At that speed, when you're at 25,000 feet, you have a much bigger horizon. It's a much larger distance across the planet. So to disappear like that within 4 seconds was highly unusual for them.
I guess anything going that fast turns into a ball of light.
Right.
Probably.
Well, Randy, didn't some of the kids say that they saw a ball of light and it turned into the disc, or am I getting that wrong?
Several of the kids said that they saw a flash of light in the sky.
Yeah. Okay.
And before all this stuff happened, there was a lot that happened. There was a lot that happened beforehand. That several of the children had seen in the sky.
Okay.
Some say it was a flash of light. Some had actually seen the silver thing, but there was a flash of light involved. That I do know. A lot of people at least had reported that.
Yeah.
And then it was the next thing that happened was it was on the ground or hovering above the ground.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Salma, so in the chat room we had a question. Someone, you have described the being or beings, whichever they were, but what about the craft itself? Can you describe that? Or did you even pay attention to that with the being there?
The being was what I remember most, if I'm being honest. The craft, I do remember drawing a craft, so I remember seeing some part of it. I don't even know the extent of what I saw in terms of size. But I would say maybe it was silver-esque in color, maybe sort of like disc-shaped-ish. But it was a type of metal or fabrication that I'd never seen before. And my dad is a steel fabricator, so I could say that's steel, that's aluminum or whatever, but I had never seen anything like that before, so I have no idea what it was. It was completely unusual. And I say silver-esque because it wasn't quite silver, but it's the closest thing I could link it to.
Do you remember any type of seams or anything like that, or did it look smooth? I mean, is there any other detail about it that you remember? And also, some of the kids thought it was floating a little bit off the ground. Did you happen to notice that as well?
I didn't notice it floating. I did notice it, and I noticed flashing lights at first. I think there were some very interesting maybe patterns. I don't know if they were seams per se, but they were patterns, and I don't really know how to describe them. But they were a lot darker than the color of the craft itself. But they were like some form of patterns on like the top half of the craft, if that makes sense.
Wow, that's really, really fascinating. Now, how were your fellow schoolmates? Did anyone absolutely lose it, or was everyone maintaining calmness through this whole thing?
Decorum? No, people started crying after a while, because panic, if you think of you see so few people gather in an area, it's not so much of a big deal. Then more people come, and then everybody's confused by what they're looking at because we don't understand what we're looking at. And then one person started crying, and then it just took off from there. And I think that's when I let go of Emma's hand and went to check on my brother and sister, because I was like, oh no, I'm not having them in a panic. But incidentally, that entire half of the playground where the grade 1 through grade 4s were, nobody had any experience on that half of the playground. They were playing like nothing had happened. It was almost as though we were in two separate worlds. We were looking at each other in a mirror, same day, same time, just experiencing completely different things. And the experience was happening all on this end, and nothing was happening on this end. Because my brother and sister were looking at me like, what are you talking about? We're fine. There was nobody crying on that end. And yet in the big kids' playground, panic had ensued. And that's when somebody went to call the teachers from the staff meeting.
Yeah. I know you said that time moved very, very slowly for you, but would you be able to guess about how long this whole thing may have taken place after you talked to other people?
No, not a clue. Could have been a
Wow.
blink of an eye, honestly, because we've spoken about it, a few of us, over the course of the last couple of years, to try and figure out this time thing. And a lot of us didn't even really realize there was this time thing that had happened to all of us until we started talking about it. And you're like, oh my gosh, yes, I remember that. And do you remember, like, did you get this feeling? And it's like, yes. So how much time do you think it was? I have no clue. Honestly, I could not tell you. It could have been a blink. It could have been 20 minutes. It could have been 30 minutes. I don't know. Break was still
Amazing.
going on, so
Yeah.
it was
how
still
about
during the
that?
break.
Now, as far as you know, were any of the children at all in denial of the whole thing?
I mean, not that I know of. I think there may be some people who chose not to talk about it, of course, who maybe did see something similar, something more. I have no idea. Most of the people, there are also a lot of people on the playground who did not see anything. You know, who were in our year and who were in the exact same part of the playground who did not see anything.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, I think,
Yes.
there's also, that's true. And also the grade 1s and 2s were never interviewed, and they were never
Yeah.
taken into account as far as what they had seen. I just wanted to throw that in there, that there were several grade 1s and 2s were never interviewed that I have interviewed that witnessed that day. That so they talk about this number of being 60 children, or I personally think it was a lot more than that, because of the grade 1s and 2s that didn't do drawings, they didn't do personal interviews at that time with them because the school wanted to protect them. That came from the headmaster himself. But yeah, it is odd that there were some people that did not see anything at all, that were there, and it did also seem to rely on where they were, their position on the field.
Yes.
I think everybody at the edge of the playground, I think most everybody saw that. But and they, everybody saw it from their own perspective. Certain people saw it from saw different things because of the position they were in. Anyway, I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Randy.
Yeah.
So, Salma, there was a question that came in the chat room. Do you talk with any students as adults about the incident? Now, you kind of mentioned that you kind of put this away for a while, but now that it's come back into your life, have you been able to engage with fellow students now about this?
Yes, 3 in particular. We first spoke and saw each other for the first time since the incident in 2013 or something. And so since then we've been able to talk, I think, a lot more about our own experiences and how our experiences have shaped us. But it took a long time. And I wouldn't say I talked to everyone who has had this experience, because I'm not really, I mean, everybody has their own lives. But there are 3, at least 3, whom I do connect with.
That's great. Now, Randy and you have both just talked about different perspectives and some people not seeing it. How about the recounting of this? A lot of times I talk about memory is infallible, and sometimes people remember things totally different than it really happened. Do you see mostly consistencies? Well, let's go all the way back to when it happened. Did people see basically the same thing? I mentioned earlier that, one kid said it had long hair and you didn't see any hair. So were there inconsistencies, and did the deniers or the people that were trying to debunk it, did they focus on that and say, hey, look, this is did you have to deal with any of that?
Not really. I mean, the thing that struck me the most was that over time, these children were interviewed over and over and over and over again. And what struck me was that the story was the same. The basic outline of the story was the same. The description of the craft, this description of the being. I've not really met or talked with any debunkers that know enough about the story to even have a conversation with, to be honest. Memory is infallible. And Cynthia Hind, who covered this story or fallible, is that the right word?
Maybe I said it wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, it is fallible. And because when somebody's in a car accident, everybody saw the same thing, but people see different things about what happened, and their accounts are different. Cynthia Hind, who originally investigated this for MUFON, she said that's what really convinced her the most about the witness testimony, was their testimony was not all the same. She said if this was a fabricated story or something like that, the story would be the same. But every child that was interviewed, or the adult that was interviewed in the morning, they all had their own experience of the story. That it was unique to them. And I think that's also, kind of what I'm concentrating on this film is this is a people story. These people real people, credible, solid people who witnessed something extraordinary. And, why can't we have these conversations about these incidents, these types of incidents, because they do happen. And I think we need to learn, try to learn something from them.
Yeah, agreed. So I want to ask Salma, you talked earlier about how you think the accident you were in prior to this and also this has shaped your life. Can you talk about how this incident in particular, how it has shaped your life differently than it may have been if it didn't happen?
Sure. I think I'm continuing to learn how it's shaping my life. That's a constant learning curve, and will be. But I think that it definitely opened up my mind to the fact that there was more than just us out there, because whatever I had seen was not of this place. It was nothing that I could connect my 11-year-old mind to. So it definitely opened up my mind in that sense, that I just became, I think I became very open-minded, because I never doubted what I saw. I may not have understood it, but I never doubted it. And I knew that there was a reason that I had seen what I had seen. And so I definitely, how close-minded can you be at 11? But it forced me, I think it's definitely shaped a lot of things that happen. I always try and keep an open mind about it. And I know that anything is possible, and there's definitely more than just us out there.
Wow. Yeah. So it's giving you, there's a lot of people that think there's going to be panic in the world if the story gets out there that there's someone, and I don't think so. I think a lot of people may kind of handle it the way you have. And basically that is, we're not alone. There's a quote out there saying, either we're totally alone or there's life out there. Either way is very scary.
Yeah, right.
Like
well, and in terms of like chaos, we live in that already, really.
Yeah.
So it's all about perspective and how we can use this incident to connect to other people's incidences of these experiences or similar experiences, or incidences that are happening more recently or have happened more recently, and understand that there's obviously a pattern here for something that we need to pay attention to. Not in a scary way, but in a way of understanding. And I think that that's for us to create this film is something that helps create the discourse on what that might look like.
Yeah, I really think that's important, because thank you for saying that, Salma. Yeah, I think that's we need to have a conversation about this in our families, open media. And I kind of think I know what you're saying, Martin, about the panic. People talk about that. I really have a feeling that something like this will bring us together in a way that we've never seen before. Because we get in our spats about our different races and our different religions, but we're talking about something else from somewhere else that may have evolved somewhere else. I don't know. But I think the potential for a complete change in a really a good way for humanity is possible through disclosure of this. And I got to say, like, I think anybody that starts researching this, and this was a film, you do your research making a film and you start to learn about what this phenomenon is about, and you learn about all these other cases around the world, and it really, I just want to just say that, like, you don't really understand how rampant or widespread this phenomena is until you really look into it. And it's not at the UFO conferences or things like that. It's from real people, and you hear their stories and how much it's affected them and changed their lives. And I just feel we need to, and that's what this film is aimed to do. Is like, let's talk about it,
Yeah. I think that's good. Salma, there is someone in the message room that wanted to know, do you think it had any type of impact on your dreams or intuitive abilities?
Yes, I
Wow.
do actually. I mean, I understand that it did now. I don't think that I did for a number of years. It took me a while. I am somebody who I like to help people. I like to be there for anyone other than myself, really, which is not always the healthiest. But anybody that is not fully represented, which is what I feel that experience was. It was like, I don't know what you are, so I don't understand who you are. So I'm going to work toward understanding more, and that's what I strive to do that on a daily basis. My education has been in human rights, in international relations, and how we can work together and figuring out how working together helps people. So I definitely think that it's helped with that. In terms of my intuition, yes, I think so as well, in varying degrees for many things. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Now, when this happened, how long would you say it was before people started talking about the possibility of being visited by an extraterrestrial as the answer to what you had no idea of? What happened?
I think it was gosh, I don't know. It may have even been the first interview, which I don't remember who it was. I think the first interview was either SABC. It wasn't ZBC. ZBC was not the first.
That's true.
Crew that came. I remember that. I think the first crew may have been SABC or BBC, to be honest.
Yeah, it was BBC. It was
because
BBC.
It was BBC, right? Because
Yeah.
I remember I had an aunt that lived there, and she saw me on the news or wherever it was broadcast, and she called my mom and said, "What's going on?" And so I was like, "Oh gosh, yeah, I guess I should probably tell my parents about this." And that's when I told them. But yeah, it was interesting that our own local crew was not the first ones on site.
Yeah, I can speak to a little bit about that. It was brought up initially as by some of the kids that it was some kind of alien or something that wasn't of this world. But the BBC, when they got there, they were very skeptical and saying, "Are you sure you didn't see a helicopter, Air Force jet?" I mean, he went through the reporter just kept asking over and over, "You sure it wasn't a black Zimbabwean that you saw?" I mean, it was very. Yeah, so they had a rough. They had to fight for this. They had to fight in a way that all the kids, in a way that I don't think people understand yet, but to be believed, because there was a lot of people around them, including the teachers and the staff initially, that just didn't believe them, But except for a few that really knew the kids. And knew that they would not come running into a staff meeting in a panic, telling them about this thing they saw. They just knew that they had seen something that really disturbed them. But yeah, I mean, I got to hand it to them. They have really, as a group, stuck together and demanded to be believed.
Yeah.
And you don't do that for a
that-
made-up story. You don't do that for a
No.
hoax. You don't do that for a made-up story. These are
We certainly don't do that for a lie, for something you don't believe in. And thank you for reminding me of that, Randall, because, you know, it's been so long. We were interviewed by so many people. I don't remember who all of them were, but that was definitely one of the crew that I was referring to earlier, Martin, in the sense that, you know, some of the naysayers that I felt like they were just there to do a job. They were not interested in really what we had to say, nor really believed us. Because I think if you're grilling an 11-year-old or 11-year-olds and younger to that degree, I mean, goodness.
Right. How long would you say, I know the time thing you were talking about, but did the teachers actually go outside and try to see what everyone was seeing? Was there ever that point, or had it vanished?
Let me see if I remember this. It took a while for the teachers to come out, by the way. They did not come out immediately, is my recollection.
That's true.
They took some time to come out, whether they were finishing up what they were doing or they just thought, oh, you know, these kids are overreacting. I don't know. But I think it took one teacher or some teachers maybe like stepping out to see what was going on the playground. And then they saw that, you know, panic, that people were crying. It was just not a normal day on the playground. I don't know exactly how long it took, maybe 10 minutes for them to come, maybe 15. I honestly don't know. I know they did not come out immediately because the people that went to call them called them, told them, came back to the playground and said, we told them, but they don't believe us.
Oh.
Yeah, that's true. I could verify that. And two teachers, grade 3 teacher and the Shona teacher were the two teachers that came out, were the first to come out. And then Mr. Vernon came out a little later. So that's the benefit of having all the archival and having interviewed a lot of people to find out all the little details, which I can't wait to share. I've told Salma this before, you know, to share with the kids, with the people that were there, like all the details, you know, like how it went down.
Yeah.
And because I think it'll be valuable for their own understanding and healing, or how, you know, if something like that happened to me in that way, I would want to know as much as possible. And I can't wait to really, you know, give them that information.
In the chat room, Michael wanted to know, what would you say if someone said that these beings were from another dimension? Has anybody ever brought that up to you?
What would I say?
Yeah, what would you say to that? Yeah.
I would say maybe. I know they're not from here, so they're definitely from somewhere else. You know, where that is, I don't know. But I think that that's a good way to start a conversation.
Yeah.
And you know, start a dialogue about that. So.
And that was in my opinion, that was a perfect answer. And also in the chat room, someone wanted to know, you talked earlier about it was a Christian school mostly, right?
Yes.
Did that apparently affect your religion or anyone that you know, like to all of a sudden think there was extraterrestrial?
Not that I know of. I can only speak for myself. And I mean, when we leave primary school, you're 12. So I don't know if you've fully formed what you think yet at all. I highly doubt it. But for me, it did not. I think it didn't really correlate with anything I'd been taught, but I wouldn't say it necessarily went against it entirely. But I also have my own sense in my own mind to deconstruct what that means to me and what my upbringing means to me, and find a median in between. I don't think that, you know, one determines the other. I think they're completely separate.
Okay, so in the years of, let's say, suppression, or the years that you didn't want to think about it, did you have like certain triggers, like something like all of a sudden you'd see, you know, a movie coming out about extraterrestrials or something like that? Did you have some things that would like bring you back to the reality of what happened?
Yes, there were always people asking me at school.
Really?
When I went to when I went to high school, there were maybe three or four people from my primary school who were in the same grade as me when we moved to high school, and we went to the same high school together. So that story definitely spread. Also, you know, you don't all go to the same high school, so people kind of ask what primary school you went to, and people would be like, oh, Ariel, that's where you saw the UFOs, and then it would be like, wait, weren't you on TV? Or they'd ask, did you see the UFOs, or what did you see? So they were reminders over the courses of the years. Yeah.
Did you?
Quite a few.
A lot of times, did you always answer honestly, or did you say you didn't want to talk about it?
I always answered honestly. If somebody asked me what I saw, I would tell them. If they asked me if I saw UFOs, I would say, well, I saw something not from here. If they wanted to have a conversation about how I hadn't seen what I had seen, I would just end the conversation and walk away, because I had no capacity for that. Like, I was not going to have my own experience diminished by someone else's inability to even have an open mind to try to understand what my experience was, while like wrapping it under some falsification of the fact that they cared, because they really didn't.
I have to tell you this because I'm kind of getting a little chuckle out of it, and that is, I have someone in the chat room who's he's very, well, let's just say he's not really generous with my guests.
Okay.
He usually finds fault with them. He's going to laugh when he hears me say that. But here is his phrase: "This lady is one of the most intelligent and credible witnesses I've heard."
Oh my, thank you.
Yeah. So I
Thank you.
had to say that, because this is probably one of the only nice things he said.
He said,
I'm going to give him a hard time about
I am
that.
very honored for me to have been a recipient of a nice thing that he said. Thank you.
Yes.
I genuinely appreciate anybody who is interested. I've never asked anybody to believe in what I believe I saw. I just ask for a conversation about it, and to not discredit it and shut it down immediately. And so, I think that there's a lot more space to do that now than there was in 1994. We also I live in a different country to where I did before. That was very, very suppressed at that time. I don't know what it's like now. Randall has been back to my homeland more recently than I have, so he can speak to that. But I think that we are in we've kind of taken a turn, I think it's safe to say, where we have the room to have these conversations.
Yeah,
and I'm very, very appreciative of that.
Yeah, and I think that the science is opening these conversations up, because I believe you're right on there, Salma. Just that we weren't talking about other planets 10 years ago, knowing that other planets that could possibly support life out there are out there, and we know that now. So, I think science is. We might want to start looking at, well, yeah, maybe microbial life and all that, but what if? What if? And if that what if is real, how is it going to manifest in our world? And has it done that already? And have we missed it? Has science missed it? That's a possibility. I think that's why the conversation is going to keep opening, and events like this are important. And there's this event in particular has an enormous amount of credible people who witnessed a single event.
Yes.
So it's important.
Yeah. Like I said in the beginning, I do think this is one of the most important cases, and I was really excited that I was going to be talking to you.
Thank you, Martin.
This sounds like I'm wrapping it up, and it's not, but it's a question that I just don't want to forget to ask. Where do you hope that this film, the Ariel phenomena, will bring this? What do you hope that will change or help in this whole situation?
Is that a question for me or
Oh,
Randall?
yes. No, well, I'll
me.
ask him as well, but no, for you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think, sorry, Martin, it's been a long day. I think that my hope is that this film will open people's minds to at least having the conversation. about the fact that these things could exist. There's other life out there. I think that showcasing children who had very limited, very like no outside influence at all on what this experience could have been, but were still brave enough to speak up about it, should attest to the fact that we're telling the truth and what we saw was real and genuine, and that there are other people out there who have experienced and will continue to experience things like this, and that we should be talking about it and understanding what it means, as opposed to just not talking about it and worrying about who will believe us and who won't. That's my hope of what this film would bring. I don't know. I've seen very small snippets of it, so I don't know what it all entails. Like I know Randall is a magic worker, so it's going to be a lot more than that. But for me, my takeaway in what I think and my hope was that I brought to the film was that I could simply tell my story, tell my truth, and we could have a conversation about it.
Yeah, I love it. That's really good. Well, I might as well ask you that question too, Randy. Again, I'm not wrapping it up. We still have 20 some odd minutes left here.
No, it's an important question because in this film, I'm trying to address it not as a woo-woo factor, special effects kind of thing about, UFOs and aliens. I'm trying to, this film is about people, and, there's a lot of different events that people go through that they don't get to be heard. And this is one of them, and it's very similar to other events that happen to people in the world where they either are ridiculed and not accepted, and this particular one is I think very important, and also that the tagline to the film is what do you do when you experience something so extraordinary and no one believes you? I mean, what do you do? And most people, and John Mack talked about this, and many other people have, but a lot of these people go inside and they don't talk about it. They stay silent. And I can't tell you how many people I've met that even outside of this particular incident, who just don't talk about it. They've had an extraordinary experience, and they don't tell their own family. They don't tell their spouses. It's just incredible the lengths they will go not to talk about it because of fear of not being accepted. So I hope, my biggest hope is that this film helps to change that. So it can just be like adults and just like discuss it. And that's my biggest hope.
Well, that's great. So Randy, along those lines, have you reached out to some of the witnesses and they just don't want to talk about it?
Yes.
And what would you say a percentage? I mean, is there a percentage of people?
I would say, I would say, I'm trying to add that and do the math here. I would say a good 40%.
Wow.
Yeah. And then, and there's a lot of people also that I just couldn't get to that were willing to be interviewed, but they were all over the world, in Germany and New Zealand. And, but I spoke to quite a few of them, but there's also a lot of people that witnessed this that I spoke with, but were not willing to be on camera. They were afraid. And there's a lot of witnesses that I know exist that I never found. I mean, I was impressed by the amount of witnesses that weren't even at the Ariel school that witnessed this event happening in the surrounding time. That I knew there was some talk of a meteorite entry or satellite, and I really went into that. That was several days before. But these other witnesses were around that, the day before, the morning, the day after. So, yeah, I know there's more witnesses out there that I was not able to find.
Wow. I think it's interesting that some people don't want to talk about it. I mean, I understand when someone doesn't want to be on camera, But that leads me to wonder if perhaps they had a negative experience through this whole thing.
Well, we talked about when you guys were talking about religion. So yeah, Ariel was a Christian school, but there were quite a few Shona who have their own religion and like animism, and their interpretation. They believe that it was their ancestors, or there were different interpretations at the school. But one of the witnesses that we agreed to have an interview, and we spoke on the phone, and I went to interview him. This was in South Africa, and I got to the interview site, and he said, look, I don't want to do it. And I said, well,
Wow.
we talked about it, and I said, I asked him, I said, well, why is it that we set up this time, and what's the reason you don't want to go into it? I mean, I was open to accepting it. And he said, well, I feel like that it had something to do with the devil.
Ah.
And I was like, and well, it was interesting. And I said, okay, I don't think that's, I told him my personal opinion, but I walked away from that thinking, you know what, something pretty big deal happened there. Even if it, to even bring up the fact that it was something religious, that impactful, said a lot too. I really wish I could have interviewed him. I wish he wasn't so religious about it, and in deciding, he was afraid. He was obviously afraid of what happened there. So religion did have an impact, and it had an impact on these kids as a whole, because a lot of the moms and dads were very Christian, and it was very hard to in at that time to be open to the possibility of this fitting into their worldview.
Right, I get that. Randy, while I have you on right now, and you probably can guess one of the #1 questions that I'm being asked in the chat room, and that is, when will the film be out?
Yeah, it has been a really difficult process to make a film like this and make it as good as this, and get the right people to work on it, and that's been the goal. So we're at a really good place. We're probably going to be close to a final in December, but again, a lot of people I don't think understand how difficult it is to make a film of this size. It's, I'm dealing with 600 hours of footage, tons of archival footage. And, the next step is I'm going to be starting working with a composer, and then we have to go color correction. I mean, we're looking at February, March at a release, but that again depends on distributor. We have a lot of, but it's definitely going to happen before the end of spring in 2018. That I do know. And, this is sort of the final sprint to the finish line after all this time and all this research and all this retrieving of footage and interviews. So, I'm very excited to, be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel and get this out to the world for sure.
Well, I know you have a very high standard, and you do an amazing job. And your photography, by the way, is just incredible.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So I understand that you're not just trying to get something out. You're trying to make it a piece that's going to be timeless.
I could have done this. I could have got this movie out in 2 years, and then I started getting more information, finding more people. I'm like, this story, I'm only going to get one chance to tell this story, and I want to do it right, because the story deserves it. There's so many people in this story, the reporters, the witnesses involved, Salma, so many others. There's just a lot of people that, and I like to do, anybody that knows me knows that I like to do things right, even if it takes forever. Yeah. And I want to be proud of what I've done as far as a piece of work when I'm done, and I want it to be something for the witnesses so they can have for themselves, and to be timeless in the fact that, okay, this is the definitive coverage of this event, you know, for historical purposes too, like you said.
And I was glad to see that Dan Aykroyd stepped up and helped you out with a little promotional.
Yeah, Dan, nice. Fantastic. Yeah, Dan Aykroyd was just a really good. He's a really big-hearted man, and I had interviewed him because he was one of the last people to interview Dr. John Mack from Harvard.
Really?
Yeah. So, because Dan was planning on doing a paranormal talk show, and it never launched. So, but I found out he had the interview, and I got the interview from him, and he agreed to. I asked him, would you be okay with me interviewing him? And he, you know, donated his time, and yeah, I've been getting a lot of great help from a lot of people like that. But we're still doing an Indiegogo. we're still raising funds. It's expensive. Boy, I tell you, you get in post-production.
Yeah, we had a private conversation a while back, and you were telling me about editing and how costly that is. Very.
Oh my God.
And so consuming.
Yeah.
All right, Salma, back to you. A question I have is, you said at the time you didn't have any fear. Now, do you think if you saw something again, someone asked in the chat room if you ever had any type of encounter. I don't know if you have or have not, but do you think you'd have fear this time, or do you think it'd be the same way if you had to guess?
I think if I had to guess, if I had the experience again or another experience, I would definitely be more intrigued than I was at 11. I don't believe, I didn't feel afraid. I just wasn't sure of what I was seeing and what I was experiencing at 11. So I think this time around, if it were to happen again, I would definitely be less inhibited.
Really? Wow.
Because I think I have more of an understanding of what my experience was. I don't know if people have multiple experiences like that. I have no idea. I've often wondered about it. Sometimes I'd be like, well, can't you just come back again so we can have that chat? You know, like, let's finish that chat. To be honest, I have thought that from time to time, but I also know that if it's meant to be, it will.
Now, you said you were so incredibly close to this thing. And what was it, about 3 feet tall? That's what a lot of people mentioned.
Yeah, yes, 3 to 4 feet tall, I guess. I was taller than it was. And I'm tall, but I was also a very tall 6th grader. So that was just a little alarming, because I was like, what am I looking at here?
Yeah.
What am I looking at here?
Well, I know how
it was about that height.
I know how kids are and how they like to touch anything. I'm surprised no one tried to touch the being or the craft.
There's something about those tree trunks as a boundary, Martin. I'm telling you, people, we took that very seriously. Nobody crossed that boundary at all, whether it was your arm or your foot or your toe. I also think that because a lot of us were unsure of what we were looking at, we just knew that we were looking at something unique and different. You're also less likely to, reach out. I certainly was. Curiosity was not going to try and kill my cat that day. I was not reaching out and trying to be like, what is this? But I can only speak for myself. I think just the general feeling and sense on the playground, that probably makes sense, is that, okay, we know we're looking at something, we don't know what it is, so we're just going to observe from afar, which I think incidentally is what they did as well, because none of them came into the playground. Not a single one.
Wow. At
least none that I saw, and I none of the people that I am still in contact with, when we talk about it, remember the beings being in the actual boundary of the playground.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that is really something. I'm opening this up if someone wants to join us in Google Hangouts. All you have to do is, if you're listening live, all you have to do is just type in your Gmail address into the chat room, and I can join you. So back to you about the in your exploration, Randy, of doing this film. Did anyone try to find trace evidence?
Yes.
At the site?
Yes. That was 4 days later. That was through MUFON, Cynthia Hind, and a technician who had a Geiger counter, and they actually did soil samples. It was pretty, considering the technology, in Zimbabwe at the time, they used what they could. Was a couple other instruments that they used, but they didn't detect anything abnormal in that area. So, I mean, that was interesting. Something you brought up earlier, I know, the kids had said the whole hair without hair incident, description of this being. Well, I was wondering, that was a big one for me. It was like, in the beginning, it was like, all right, wait a second. And that's unusual for one in the research that I did. And then I came upon an interview with a couple of the kids from an archival section that I retrieved out of Africa, and where one girl in particular, she says, yeah, one had hair, one had what looked like hair that was standing near the object, and the other one, which came and approached the playground, didn't have any hair. And I was like, oh, okay. So that one in particular said, okay, I get it. So it wasn't just, they weren't identical. There was definitely more than one. So anyway, I just wanted to raise that because it was a big question for me, because there was a discrepancy in different reports. Like some said that it had a hair-like thing. John Mack had asked the children a lot about that. Like, well, was it actually hair, or was it some kind of hood or whatever? But there were, from what I've been able to discover, that there were two very distinct creatures. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. I'm glad you did that.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that. Salma,
Yes.
going all the way back to the description of the being, because you're probably going to be the only one I've ever talked to that actually saw a being like that so close. And I shouldn't say that because a lot of people are saying they're experiencers and see things, but say
Sure.
you were surrounded by witnesses. When I talked to Travis Walton, he told me the eyes were the most incredible thing. The eyes were the scariest thing of them all. Do you feel the same way? Were the eyes big and black?
Yes. And I can see the picture that I drew vividly in my mind. The eyes were very, very captivating. Nothing like I'd ever seen before, and incredibly magnetic, which is, it almost felt like it took effort for me to break that gaze, which again, you kind of feel if time is slowing down, if that is in fact what happened. I don't know. But they were very big and very dark and very, very, they were captivating. It was one of those where you couldn't look away.
Now,
you didn't really know what you were looking at. So,
yeah, one of the children drew a picture where they had pupils. Are you familiar with that picture? Did you see white pupils in the middle?
I'm familiar with that picture. So he drew. He was asked what that was, and he said that it was the reflection of light that he was trying to draw. Yeah,
I got it. Okay,
yeah.
That's interesting. All right. So we have about 5 or 6 minutes left, and I want to make sure this is such a great opportunity that I get to ask you all the questions. But I think I'm going to ask you what you could tell someone out there who's maybe experienced this, that doesn't want to talk about it or suppressing it or would never want to report it. Do you feel as though you could help them through something like that?
I mean, I think that I would definitely encourage the person to talk about it if they wanted to. I think it also takes the right person to break that in. You have to feel, I almost feel that if it hadn't have been Randall, I may not be having this conversation with you.
Sure.
So the approach that the person that you're trying to have this breakthrough conversation with is really, really important. I also think that it's important to recognize that your experience is as important as you make it. And if you want something to be spoken about, if you want to have better understanding, perhaps talking about it in some way, shape, or form is a good idea. I would never begin to suggest what that is because everybody deals with things differently. And I'm not a psychologist at all, so I don't pretend to have this fantastic understanding of the human brain. But I do know that with experiences come processes, right? We all process things very differently. My goal would be to not discredit this person's experience, but to also have them think, whether it's first in journaling or in making little sound bites about what their experience is, to help them understand what that could mean. And that may eventually help them talk about it. Because I don't think that it's just I don't think it's a fluid thing. It most certainly was not for me. I can only speak for myself. But like I said, sometimes those years of suppression or the time of suppression is actually beneficial to you to realize that you're still thinking about this thing really did still happen. You still have dreams about it. You have other dreams about it. You have all these other things that have happened in your life that, okay, this is not going away. What can I do about it? What am I supposed to do about it? And I really do think that it's a transitional thing.
Yeah. It sounds like all processing what you're talking about. Did you happen to keep the drawing or drawings that you did?
I did not. Randall, do you have it? I know we have a picture
I believe
of it
I do. Yes.
somewhere.
I do.
I do not have it. We let go of everything.
Yeah.
I just wanted
I think Randall probably has it.
I do.
Okay.
I've got them all. So I just wanted to say, to kind of add to what Salma's saying, is that, yeah, I mean, people do keep things quiet, and when they really do need to talk about it, and when you keep something quiet and inside for too long, it manifests in other ways that are not so good, in addictions, other kind of things. So I think it is really good to, if there is somebody out there that needs to speak about it, that they speak about it with the right person, and know who to trust, and take it slow, because some of these times I've run into this with several of the other kids. It's really that we're really traumatized by this, and it's something that you have to really take slow. But it's it's part of the culture that we're not able to speak about it, and that's what needs to change.
Well, excellent. All right, so we're at the. I wonder if I could do a split screen here with both of you on. We are at the end of our show, and so I guess I've really enjoyed it tonight, and I want to ask you in the show notes. I want to say in the show notes there are some drawings, there's some pictures, and you can find that on podcastufo.com. So all that's there, and also there's I think there's a link to the FundMe page you have, as well as the Ariel.
ArielPhenomenon.com, and they were doing an Indiegogo. I got to tell you, we did this Indiegogo. We started it to raise funds for the finishing funds, and then we got hit by hurricane, shooting. Yeah. I mean, we couldn't have picked a worse time to do an Indiegogo campaign. But yeah, if people are really want to help, we need it.
Yeah.
So thanks.
Excellent. All right. Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Randy. Don't say goodbye yet, Selma. I'm going to say goodbye to you. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And glad you made it to the show. Geez, it was.
Thank you.
Yeah, for a while there. Yeah, thanks so much. And I got to tell you, you're one of my favorite guests. This was really great.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yes, and I hope your future is as bright as I think it's going to be.
Thank you. I hope so too. I think it will be.
Yes. All right. You take
Well,
care.
thank you. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
right. Bye-bye. And thanks for joining me in the studio.
Thank you. And I'd also like to nominate Salma for Guest of the Year. She did a
Okay.
great job.
I'll take that. All right. All right. Good night, everyone.